Well, hello there, everyone. You here talk about here with the signature right here, and how many of us have really thought about that to where that a signature is another way of how to get a job done, and people want to know too that really the different things for what you can do with the signature, and want to know that well, really, if you were to sign and date a document, and half the time you're probably thinking as to where you're going to maybe ask the question to where that really that if you put a different date on there, and let's just say that if you were to sign a document and put on there that you go ahead and put the date on there, maybe for future references, or maybe if it goes back to maybe 2 weeks ago or something like that. So at the time, you want to know too that why do you think that that would really make a difference for anything that you're working with? But at the same time, no, like anybody say, if you're trying to pay a bill for sure, that you may wind up maybe spending more money on more stamps, just to be able to put together, and maybe just to be able to spend more time with if your signature is not present, just to be able to take care of something, for sure. It's like, well, really, that then the job's not done. And that's why it's like, you want to know too that, do you think that your signature, your autograph is really going to make a difference for anything that you're working with? But, at the time, you want to know too that if you were to divide, if you were to, you know, yeah, the things that you see on your name, and at 102 that if you were to spell your name backwards, what do you think that it would look like on a signature? And everybody 102 that right. If you could spell your name backwards, what do you think that it would be look like? Even for a username. So let's just say that if I were to say, I'm like, something like MCQ. I'm like, MCQ or something like Q for quote or something like that, and then put maybe a star right there. So let's just say that on the other hand, that if that right there was supposed to be maybe my username, but then like I talked about before, that if I were to use a code that contained numbers toward it, the 56109 right there. And you want to know too that, well, really, if that's supposed to be your code ID right there, and just for security purposes, that do you think anybody would want to mess with that? Like you want to know too about your signature, that just for verification purposes, that we ask you to verify that code that you set earlier. And you might think as to, well, really, that I was really just testing the equipment for sure. But on the other hand, it's like people may want to know too that with that signature, and you want to know too that, hey, that nowadays with digital technology, that it sure seems that way. That if you're just trying to get some practice with something, you want to know too that why can't you just reset the whole module, and you'll be able to tell people. I'm like, oh yeah, well, anything that you're working with, really. But I tell you one thing though, that whenever you first learned how to use digital signature, though, that you'll want to know too that look at that more likely like like a combination to a safe or something like that. But like everybody else would say too, that the amount of times that it's happened to them, to where you'll want to know too that really that everything seems to be so totally different from how it used to work, right? But at the time, you want to know too that you know if you were to write down today's date on a note paper right here, if you were to write down today's date, but let's just say if you were to start out the date by saying the day, and then the month, and then the year, or something like that. Or you put down the year instead, like for 2022, and then and if you were to put on there, Yeah, I don't think everybody's really going to understand that, but I'm just saying. And if you put on there for oh 05 right there, not everybody's really going to know what that means right there. So it sure seems that way that every time I think about that, and people are going to want to know too that, what do you mean by that? Or what is that supposed to mean? What does that mean right there? I go and put it right there as a date right there, but then I'm going to maybe put on here the 577890. 577890. So that right there is supposed to be maybe like a language that you're giving the data science database about, this right here is the year, and then the 15 and the 5 right here. That will be for May 15th of 2022 right there. Maybe not everybody's really going to know what that means. And like everybody else would say too, that really that, if you can set any ground rules to where how the system works, for sure, do you think that that would mean that you're in charge of the system? And like everybody else might even say that, really, do you really want to think that way, to where if you were to set a ground rule to the system, do you think that maybe that the system would follow up about that or whichever? But that's really something to think about, really. But on the other hand, it seems like that when if we were to set that source of study into like an equation, though, that what's really coming to your mind, though? If people are able to follow up about that, do you think that on average, though, that really, I know what you mean by that, or no, I don't know what you mean by that. What do you mean by that? You got right here for 2022 right here along with 15 and 05 right there, and then you have right here is the code. So let's just say if you were to receive a text message or something like that, and I want to know too that your code is your code so it sure seems that way that when we do the studies right here, that it's like why is it that for the most part that whenever you first start you learning how to use codes, that originally you may use that you used to do it on a telephone, especially if you were trying to make a collect call or something like that. But it sure seems that way that unfortunately, it seems like nowadays, for the 21st century, you want to know too if this is maybe going to start applying to the electronic signatures. You may think as toward well, really, if you're using it maybe for the electronic documents, or maybe just to be able to place a phone call, but a lot of times you want to know too if this code, just for security purposes, it's going to start applying to a lot of the other signatures. And if we were to do the research about this, talk about for the data science, though, is that really something that needs to be recognized, right? But at the same time, it's like if you were to write the year like that and then put the code right there, and everybody else might even say that if that right there is supposed to be a command, or if that's right there is supposed to be a rule that you can follow, to where I'm like, well, if you can set your own ground rules, and let's just say that if you were to put the date on there for any reason at all, and let's just say that just for future references, that this is supposed to be a scheduled time for what you're working with. So let's just say that the main reason you would be doing this task right here, this agenda right here, is that you're trying to schedule a date to whenever you're going to be working on this. And so like everybody else would say that, really, can you really schedule 6 months ahead of time and put the year like that right there? Put 2022 and 15 and 05 right there. Not everybody's really going to know what that means, but it sure seems that way, that I guess not everybody's able to monitor all the devices and all the smartphones and everything all around the globe. And so that's why it seems like that, if you were to write something like that, and just thinking as to word at any source of equation whenever it comes to writing down the date. And you want to know too that whenever you first learned how to do this, you were actually being tested. You were actually testing the equipment. But like any employer might even say too that you know for sure whenever, if you were able to get something to work for sure, then they're going to be saying that, yeah, I came across your resume and I would like to talk to you about something that came to our database and such. But at the same time, though, that you tell them that you were actually doing that for practice or working at your own private time, but at the time you want to know too that this right here, that right there is supposed to be the date right there. But like everybody else would say, that if you're trying to schedule a time to work on this, just to see about, okay, yeah, if you're trying to schedule a time where you can actually, work more on the practice, right? But it sure seems that way that why would you want to use that same method, that same technique and method, for a signature? That same technique for a method, though, and do we really kind of call that the technique? The same technique. I'm trying to say technique here, but yeah. I'm like the same. I'm trying to say, but the same skills and the same technique, and so that's why it's like when we talk about practicing with electronic signatures, though, that not everybody can really see that right or notice that right away. But at the time, it's like the way we think about that though is that we want to go back and look at this right here and 102. This right here, not everybody's really going to know what that means right there. Not everybody is going to really know what that's supposed to do or whichever. But at the time, it seems like really you want to tell everybody to try to think about the tools that we have access to. What is the most powerful tool that we have access to whenever it comes to digital software? The powerful tools, as we know, the powerful tools. What is the most powerful tool that we have access to nowadays? And with that powerful tool, that do we think on average that is to where that if this right here is supposed to be a powerful tool, then at least try to get it to work. And like I earlier say, if it's supposed to be a tool, get it to work, number one. So it sure seems that way, that whenever you were first introduced to this tool, that the first thing that you were first introduced to where you were trying to get that file to open. You were trying to look at it, number one. But let's just say that this right here, everybody else might even say that, okay, that right there shows your name right there. But really, if you were to look at this in a typical data science right there in 102, that this right here is just a bunch of codes and numbers, right? But at the time that you 102, that you put the date on there, and 10 that really that what is that supposed to mean right there? And if it's basically another way of how you might call it is to where you're trying to schedule. Are you trying to schedule maintenance? Or are you trying to put something agenda on your schedule or something like that? And that's why it seems like that every time you think about that, and 102 that to where that you got the idea just by working with a bookmark. Really, I'm like, what was your original idea? What was your original thought whenever you thought about this? Really, and I'm like, well, really. The original thought that I really came up with right here was with Illustrator, that what my name would look like if I were to, I'm like, yeah, use different, topical fonts or something. So yeah, it seems like there is a difference between, somebody's really curious to know, or just that they're just checking it out or something like that. But really, though, that, we want to know too that, yeah, people are going to be asking the questions though. But the main reason you were working on this is, maybe, for reference though. You were really working on this for reference, right? You were trying to get some ideas and some clues and generate some ideas about how to make the work, better. How to get the equipment to work better, right? And a lot of times it seems like toward it, almost every experiment that you try And you're going to maybe think as to where, well, really, that, why do you think, people might say is to where that all goes by saying is to where that this tool right here was not provided at the beginning because number one, that was before it was even promoted. But, still, we need to think about the tools and techniques that we have access to now that allows us to have that ability, right? And that's why it sure seems that way. That every time we think about a signature, though, that are we necessarily going to think about maybe a code that to use and like but still that so it's like people you might even think that there's already a folder, there's already a file type that's in that name right there in the root folder or something, but at the time somebody might even say too that you look at your medical documents, and maybe if you do look at your resume, and 102 is toward it, you got your signature right there, right? But that's really all what we see right there. We don't really see anything else about anything else that you had for this presentation right here. And like everybody else would say that, well, really, that more of the details right there. And you see that right there is that is a PDF, the ownership, the ownership, right? My signature, but at the time it seems like that, really, why would anybody want to think about this to where that you were using this right here, kind of like a bookmark. You were using this right here for a bookmark, but let's just say that if you were to use this for anything such as maybe setting a security code, or maybe if you were trying to program your personal software, like let's just say if you were using the same techniques just to be able to use for your own personal reason, and like anybody say that, well, really, what's so fascinating about this? Well, I can tell you it's the code, and it's also the date right here, because the date right here, as we all know, is this date right here really supposed to tell anybody anything? Well, really, I use this right here because I'm like, that's my birthday, but still. But let's just say that if I were to put on there, maybe April 25th or something like that, but like everybody else may want to know too, that a lot of the data science, as we all know, that we think that it's all recorded based on our birthday, or based on from the time that when we decide to join the team or something like that. But at the time, you want to know too that either way, that it's like a birthday is not just I'm like a birthday or an anniversary or something like that. But I really would like to know too is that that whenever it comes to signing something, though, or maybe modifying, I'm like anything such as putting a date on something, that do we really need to know about the fact about an M and a G and along with the EAN? That's more than just the name, right? It's supposed to be a command, or it's supposed to be like a source of equation or something like that. So let's just say if you were to put if you were to put EAN and along with if you were to I'm like so it's like if you were to put the name Sean right there. But then if you were to put like maybe dash, I'm like, oh, I'm just checking up, but still, that if you were to put on here like let's just say that if I were to put on here the HEW, MMATG or something like that right there. But what exactly does that mean right there? And people might even say too that right there looks like a certain character that you would maybe want to use for like maybe for a username, or maybe for but you still. But why do we need to think about this toward it? Since you were in preschool, that you went by the name of Matthew right here, but it sure seems that way that why do we need to think about that toward it back whenever you were in preschool, that with the 21st century nowadays, it's like that this is that's your name right there. But then, of course, there's going to be another source of saying is to where that, yeah, how do you, please spell your last name that contains a certain character or something like that. Or, yeah, just for verification purposes or something like that. But it's like, yeah, if it is it really supposed to be an activity or something like that. But let's just say if I were to put on here that, MC, if I were to put on here something like, KLUIRE or something like that, or, do I even want to use that? Or I'll probably say that, I'll go ahead and use, yeah, SAUIRE or something like that. Matt Surrey or, McGuire Surrey or something like that. Yeah. So it's like, so if I were to use that, and I'm like, yeah, you go ahead and put a 3 right there, and at the time you want to know too that in case if anybody who's really curious to know though, that if you were to set a username like that, and let's just say that your typical data science though, that it's gonna, I'm like, yeah, come back. I'm like, oh yeah, if you were to send this command right here, and let's just say that if you were to set that for a username, and more likely within the next 8 hours or so, that if you set that, I'm like, yeah, well, that this, this username has already been used or something like that. So let's just say that on average, so yeah, this username has already been used, but then yeah, anything that's defined or anything like that. But let's just say that this username is available. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, that every time you think about that, why do we need to think about that? Is toward it, with our name that for this being the 21st century, that why do we need to think about our name being stored like a backpack? To where this backpack, yeah, I guess a typical JavaScript, but why do we need to think about why do we need to think about this key factor matters is know about with the backpack to where that almost everything you're working with and everything that you're working with is stored in a binder and stored on the backpack, right? But you're not really carrying this backpack on your actual back, right? What you really are doing is it's all you're using your smartphones and you're using your tablets just to be able to use a lot of this stuff, and so that's why it seems like that that at the time it's like people may say that like from ever since back in the 1970s and 1980s that there were these yeah, paperback books and all, but still that but the way we think about this is that a typical backpack, and you want to know too that yeah, well really since you were in preschool that this is how your name was pronounced right here, but it's like thinking is to where really that the things for what you can do with your autograph though, and people may want to know too that you were more famous. You were more famous just because that people found it more interesting whenever they were able to. I'm like, yeah, but still anything appealing or anything like that. But half the time you want to know too as to where what's so magical about that. But yeah, it sure seems that way. I'm like, yeah, what is so magical about that? What is so magical about that? Well, really, if it works, but on the other hand, that I'm like, yeah, you just be amazed. But it sure seems that way that whenever whenever you're like, yeah, building ideas and building confidence, right? But at the time, you want to know too that whenever you look at your name, though, that people may say is to where, yeah, well, they're going to go and give you a nickname, and a nickname, or like, yeah, you go by a different name whenever you were in school, or maybe whenever you were working for this business or something like that. But at the time, it seems like that you may go by a different name if you are, a member of maybe of the team, or maybe of the like, yeah, if you're a member, or maybe if you're a part of some group or something like that. But at the time, it sure seems that way. That each time, whenever I think about a signature, though, that yeah, you're talking about code right here, the source of language. Anyway, I hope that's some good information right there. And then you're talking about right here is that talking about with the code, with date and all. But still, talk about for scheduled maintenance and like understand about the signatures. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.